Hi everyone and welcome back to yet another episode of the Impact Her series done in collaboration with Encubay. This particular episode is very special because we have gone ahead and championed a sector which is very women-centric, which is FemTech. We have gone ahead and talked to stakeholders from across the world in order to understand the need of the sector at this particular moment and sort of the interest that the sector is building in India and also in the MENA region. We have talked to Sophie, who is from Nabta Health, and we have also talked to Evelyn, who is from MyAva, who are two pioneers in terms of companies in the MENA region and India when it comes to the FemTech sector. With that, let's just jump into the conversation.
So we founded Nabta back in 2017 to really create a more accessible and affordable way for women to access care and to empower them to manage their own care. If you look at the way that traditional healthcare is provided around the world, it tends to be very provider-led and disease-centric, meaning it'll predominantly be doctors within hospitals or clinics who will see you, and they'll try and work out what is wrong with you in order to kind of pin you to a disease or potentially several diseases. And then they will treat the disease rather than treating you in a holistic way. And for women who are very holistic when it comes to healthcare, and what I mean by that is that the things that you do on a day-to-day basis in terms of your diet and lifestyle, the way that you manage your mental health, all of these things affect your overall physical health in many, many different ways. So to be treated as one or even a set of diseases doesn't really work for women. And so what we're trying to do is create a woman-centric, woman-led and goal-oriented model of care. So we start pre-symptom, we start with the goal. What is it that you're trying to achieve for your health? Are you wanting to lose weight, fall pregnant, figure out why you're suffering recurrent miscarriages? Whatever it is, we start there. And then we allocate now a 5-person care team, a multi-specialty care team that is aligned to your goal. And as much as possible, we actually try and limit your interactions with the care team. We try to give you devices and tests and things that you can do at home to get to a diagnosis for any conditions that you have. And we assume that if you have one chronic autoimmune disease, potentially you've got several, and then to figure out how you can manage them holistically with a real focus on nutrition and mental health. The reason we decided to build this women-centric model of care that is actually agnostic in terms of infrastructure, access and education is because of the region that we're targeting. So on the Middle East, Africa and South Asia, historically very underrepresented and underserved in terms of healthcare. Most established healthcare has been built for white men. So women were excluded from clinical trials until 1994. Still today, only 19%, so 19% of clinical trial participants are female, and only a teeny tiny percentage of those are from the Middle East, Africa, and South Asia. So we're missing vast amounts of health data for almost a billion women. So what we want to do is build something that in a relevant way for women across this region, and it's a very disparate region, united by things like family, by cultural pride, by food, by a whole load of things actually that don't necessarily unite countries in the West, so the US and countries in Europe. And we're trying to scale something that can work effectively for women, regardless of whether they come from low, middle, or high income families. That's why we built this model. That's why we're focused on getting women from goal to diagnosis. And now, having been around sort of in research and development for 4 years, we're starting to commercialize and scale the platform.
I come from a complete startup healthcare background, to be precise again. So I'm a biomedical engineer by training, and it's been about 12 years in the startup healthcare ecosystem and loving every bit of it. Also, it's very special to be in a sector that requires so much to be done, and we're just kind of getting started, right? So I think for me personally, I've kind of worked in healthcare through and through, and specifically when I was diagnosed with a hormonal condition called PCOS. That's when I kind of ventured out trying to search for solutions for it and stuff like that. And I was too surprised that everything around women's health was just circling around either period tracking or pregnancy tracking. Like there's nothing else that happens to women and just these two things, right? So I was like, we need something that makes women's health more inclusive, broadens the horizon in terms of the solutions that are given, right from puberty to post-menopause. There's so many different conditions that women go through, and there should be somebody who's addressing these conditions as well. So that was the premise that I started with, and that was the birth of MyAva, essentially. We started with kind of concentrating on PCOS as a condition. One, because I did understand it myself really well. Second is there was not a lot of conversation happening about it. Even though there were 1 in every 5 women facing it, nobody was really kind of coming forward and talking about it, whether it was the uncomfortableness about talking about it or it was considered as a taboo. So we essentially just started as an awareness platform, trying to create more dialogue and conversation about it. That's where we started. And I think we've gotten so far, and now we've kind of started making more progress in the field of women's healthcare, trying to include more and more conditions like thyroid, diabetes, menopause, all of these different conditions. Yes.
Yes, definitely. So we were the first FemTech company in the Arab world, and probably for the first 2 or 3 years, we were really there on our own. It's since the pandemic started, and I think since people realized that when the world was squeezed its women, we've started to see more companies come out of the woodwork, certainly here in the MENA region, to support women with access and education relating to their health. If you look at the way health tech companies are built, they tend to focus on one of 3 areas: on education, which is the bottom rung, on access, which is the second rung, and on outcomes, which is the third rung. In order to do anything around outcomes, you do need to be in R&D, but the MENA region still is a part of the world where the support mechanisms for companies with R&D are developing. And so most of the FemTech companies that are built here still focus on education and access. So for example, you've got Mother Being in Egypt, which is very much focused on education around female reproductive health. You've got companies like Lizom and My Lilybox and Pective, which are building eco-friendly or innovative period products for women that again are focused more on access. Actually, it's about providing women with access to eco-friendly and sustainable menstrual care. We are still to see in the MENA region solutions that are more solutions actively working to improve outcomes. But in other parts of the world, we are starting to see those come up. And not only that, but we're starting to see more hybrid healthcare plays specifically focused on women's health in other parts of the world. So a very famous hybrid healthcare company is One Medical in the US, which combines digital and traditional healthcare, kind of centered around multiple clinics that they've rolled out across the States. We're starting to see FemTech companies adopt this model. So Tia Clinic, for example, which just closed a $110 or $100 million round, bringing, I think, its valuation to about $600 million is one such example. Maven, which provides health as a corporate benefit, specifically focused on women at different ages and stages, became FemTech's first unicorn last year. So we're seeing a lot of very positive movement in terms of the breadth of solution covering multiple ages and stages, and capital actually going into those in the West. We are waiting for that same level of excitement, I think, to come here, but it is starting.
I think it has evolved over time, recollecting right from my first initial pitching days to, kind of talking to VCs right now. There is no requirement at this stage to really explain the whole sector to them at this stage, right? It's established. And that's what's so amazing that, I would consider it a very significant growth since from where we started, where now you don't need to talk to people about what you're solutioning for, but you need to really kind of tell them what your solution is all about, right? So the sector itself has gained a lot of attention. This is a story that I share with everyone. When I was kind of pitching initially, right, the first investors who kind of 100x who invested into us, it was a room full of men, right? I was on a virtual call. The pandemic had just hit. We were probably 15 days into lockdown. And that was, probably my third or my fourth pitch. And I was just talking to a room full of men. I was talking about periods and menstrual cycle, having no clue if those men really got it, if they really understood the words that I was using. But I was just, kind of going on and on. I'm like, I don't care if you don't get it. If you don't get it, even better, probably go back and kind of do your learning, which they did, which was fantastic, right? So they said, okay, fine, this is what you're doing. We'll get back to you. And I was like, I always thought that I'd never hear from them, but gladly enough, they did go back. They did do their research. They talked to the women in their family. They talked to their doctors who they knew, and they came back with their research, which is fantastic. And I have seen that across the board. Luckily, touch wood, this is a very common question that I face, that you developing for female health or women's health, is there some sort of inhibition when you talk to the VC circle? Because even on the other side of the table, there are more men than women. So, but I think right now, touch wood, it's been a smooth sailing process for us. We've not had a lot of men look at it from the lens of, I don't get this, so I'm not going to invest. So that's, luckily never happened to us.